and welcome to Top Secret News Radio Show. We really appreciate you all joining us tonight. We have a great show planned. Sorry for the delay. We have been having all kinds of technical difficulties, which we actually kind of were expecting, unfortunately. But thank goodness we had a backup plan, and so we are back up and going. Renee, how are you?
I am doing great. I've been looking forward for this show for ever since we got it all booked, and so this is going to be a really, really great and exciting show.
I agree as well. I will tell you that the promos, I usually put the promos out a few hours before the show, and because, as you know, we do a lot of highly controversial shows, and this is no different. And we seem to get, very people very riled up about the topics that we cover, and this was absolutely no different for sure. I have been fielding, different questions and comments all night since we originally posted it. So it should be definitely a very, very interesting show. For those who maybe had not seen the promos and you're just a weekly listener, tonight we are going to be talking about the highly controversial subject of did the real Paul McCartney from the Beatles die in 1966 and was he replaced by an imposter? Well, tonight we're going to talk about this, and our guest says absolutely this is the case. And how would he know? Well, he's reportedly the illegitimate son of the real Paul McCartney, and he said that the Paul McCartney that we have all grown to know and love is indeed an imposter. So tonight we are joined by Stephen Dickinson, who is going to be accounting his story of, how he found out that Paul was his dad, how he has the information that he does. We're going to be talking about the discrepancies that have been posted widely about the real Paul McCartney and the fake Paul McCartney. And again, this has caused a lot of controversy on the page, and we know that a lot of people are very passionate about their side on this. So tonight we welcome your questions and comments as well as your calls. We will be taking calls and questions during the second hour, so please make sure to wait till then to call in for any questions or comments. The phone number is area code 504 273 7379. You can also join us in the Spreaker chat room. If you got there and you realized that there was a different title for the show, just refresh your browser. It should get you back to the news show, which will say Top Secret News. And then down in the bottom of the page, there will be a black box. There will be a little chat box. You can click on that. Oops. You'll click on that, and you will be able to hear the show and comment live with us during the show. So, with that being said, Stephen, are you there?
Hello, Christina. Hello, Renee. How are you doing
Hello,
tonight?
doing great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak.
Oh, we're glad to be able to have you here. So happy, that you're here to tell your story. Now, one of the main things I want to start with is just, tell us your name, where you're from, when you were born, and a little bit about how you found out about your father being Paul McCartney.
Okay. I was born in Liverpool, um, on the 10th of July, 1967. My mother was named Irene Mottram. I was born into the Anfield area of Liverpool. Now, up until around my seventh birthday, I believed my father was a man called George Dickinson. My name is Stephen Dickinson. I took his surname. But Mum was already pregnant with me when she married George, and George was always aware that I wasn't his son. But I always believed, up until my seventh birthday, that I was his son. Now, while George was out at work and I was playing round the house, Mum approached this subject, and she said, "Stephen, George isn't your real father." And I said, "What do you mean, Mum?" and Mum told me that Paul McCartney was. I know, and I was taken aback by this, but we had further conversations with it. When she seen the look of disbelief on my face, she said, "Stephen, Paul was your father, and it's important that you know it." So Mum was 100% convinced that James Paul was my father. George knew that he wasn't, and I approached this subject with my stepfather, George Dickinson, before he died, and he said, "Well, you knew that I knew you weren't my biological son, but I didn't know James Paul was your father." So he claimed he didn't know anything about this.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, Mum made me believe. I did believe it. Mum convinced me this was true. She explained how they met, because obviously I had questions, because he was a star. I'd seen him on telly. Mum had his record. She had Help, Rubber Soul, Hard Day's Night, and I played his music. I loved his music. I loved the Beatles' music. She explained that she ran a typing pool opposite the NEMS office in Liverpool. Paul used to come over and chat with her and the girls at dinner time, on his break, whenever. He became friendly with Mum, and this led to more. It led to a romance and led to me. Now, Mum told me that Paul was my father, but she never told me that he died. So for a short time, I believed that the man, Paul McCartney, was still alive, and this man was my father. I remember I used to sit in the front parlour, and I remember listening to a radio show one night, and it was about this subject. And I remember they mentioned a thing or two, and I also remember playing Strawberry Fields. It was on the Blue album that George had bought me, and if you increased, it was 33 revs per minute. If you increased it to 45, what sounded like cranberry sauce at the end of Strawberry Fields, you can actually clearly hear John say, "I buried Paul." There's clues throughout the music, throughout the artwork, throughout the videos. When you put it all together, there's actually quite a body of evidence. The man who replaced my father in the public eye, I believe there's a fair amount of evidence that his first name is William. I'm unsure about his second name. I believe he came from a military background. I believe that Sergeant Pepper is actually him. That's the title. Sergeant Pepper and the Lonely Hearts Club Band refers to William, the man who took my father's place in the public eye. And the Lonely Hearts Club Band is the other three. If you examine the front cover of Sergeant Pepper's, it's a grave scene. I don't want to go over the many sort of clues too much, Christina and Renee, because sort of well known,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we're definitely want to, stick to, your story and whatever it is that you want the public to know. I mean, as you know, there's a large listening audience that listens worldwide to this. There's a lot of attention to this subject, and we just want to give you a platform to be able to tell your side of the story and whatever you want to get out to the public. Because I know that there has been a lot of controversy. There have been a lot of attacks and harassment, when you come out with, information like this. So again, I just wanted to, be able to give a platform for you to put out whatever it is, whatever information it is that you feel is important.
Okay, well, the Beatles, the band, my father, James Paul McCartney, John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, they took the world by storm. But in 1965, controversial things started to happen, and the band became political. Things like the segregation. They refused to play in front of a segregated audience in America. The Ku Klux Klan threatened to murder them. There was controversy wherever they went in '65, and if you put them into '66, I believe that because of their political activity, they became a threat. Also, because of the peace movement in America at the time, I believe that the peace movement in America was hijacked through the entertainment industry and replaced by a military agenda. And I believe that the same thing went on in the UK. I believe that my father, I believe my father was killed as part of this agenda and replaced with someone else. I know this sounds absolutely crazy to people who haven't heard this before, but if you actually take time to look at the evidence, you'll see that after 66, the man's actually 5'11", not 5'8", 5'9", like my father. He actually has hazel-coloured eyes, and he was right-handed as well. Also, contrary to sort of belief, he wasn't a talented musician before he joined the band. He didn't have a lot of musical talent before he joined the band. So in the circles in the know, William will claim that he was a talented musician. He came in and saved the Beatles. He came up with the concept of Sgt. Pepper. And he actually saved the band after my father's death. This isn't true. I believe Mal Evans came up with the title of Sgt. Pepper's and the Lonely Hearts Club Band. Now, in Liverpool in the 60s, late 50s, Liverpool was called Pepperland because we're docks and we used to bring lots of spices into the docks. And the smell of the spices spread through the town, and the town had a smell of pepper. It got the nickname Pepperland. There's also a character in sort of Scouse mythology called Tom Pepper. Say Little Billy down the road is a compulsive liar. In Liverpool in the 60s, you would say Little Billy's a little Tom Pepper, meaning he's a compulsive liar. So Sergeant Pepper alludes to Billy, the man who took my father's place in the public eye, Billy Shears. Sergeant Pepper and the Lonely Hearts Club Band. This shows that the man who took my father's place had a military background, and John and George thought he was a liar, and Mal. He you know, he forced his way into the band, but he actually didn't have a lot of musical talent. So where he claims that he's the genius behind the Sgt. Pepper albums and the later albums, he actually isn't. Lots of the music was already written before my father died because they prepared in advance, so they obviously had music that had never been recorded before, ready to go. And I believe that the Sgt. Pepper album is a tribute to my father, and I believe that lots of known musicians played on that album. Also, there's been a vocal analysis done, a scientific, analysis of the Paul McCartney vocal. There's one person singing. They found that there's one person singing before 1966, and then after that, there's two different people singing. So William didn't actually sing all the songs after that. There was an unknown person. People speculate that it was Denny Lane, but there are actually two vocalists as Paul McCartney after that. I don't believe that William's musical talent came up to standard until Let It Be, when they did the rooftop concert. If you look into this, you'll find that that my father, John, George, and Richie loved playing live. They toured the world playing live. But after my father died in November 1966, they stopped touring after that. Any live performances are studio performances, and they're obviously not live vocals. And it's obvious when you look at the live recording of Hey Jude. It's obviously not live. You can see it's not live.
Right. Do you think that that's because that if they were out there live, that people would be able to recognize the differences? Say, I know that your dad and used to sing close to a lot of the band members, so there would be obviously if he stood, next to one of the band members, and people had seen those before and could see the height difference, or that he was playing left-handed instead of right-handed. Those would be things that the audience and fans would be able to catch.
Yeah, and any musician, I mean, let's face it, their act was, you couldn't replicate it. The vibe that those four lads had on the stage, it couldn't be replicated. And William, for all his talents, he wasn't my father. He couldn't just step into his shoes on the stage. They could pull it off if it was just a studio band, because no one knows who's playing in the studio. No one sees them playing the instrument. They could pull it off for the odd interview. He went to Kenya after my father died, to a royal hospital out there, and had plastic surgery to make it, him look more like my father. But he's a much bigger man, much broader. I'd encourage people to look at the video of "And I Love Her" from Hard Day's Night, and look into my father's eyes, and then look at the Hey Jude video and look at that man's eyes and tell me they're the same person. Look into the eyes and you can see the soul behind the eyes, and you can tell it's not the same person.
Yeah, we were looking at, we were both looking at the pictures side by side, and we could totally see the difference of the facial features, and including the eyes. And so there's totally a difference. And we've had people mention in the comments saying, well, there was some years difference. One's an older picture, and the other one is a newer one. So there's an age difference, and so they kind of throw that into the mix. But when you really study his eyes, the color of his eyes,
even the shape of the eyes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And eyelashes, long eyelashes, and the way the eyes slant, and the way he looks a lot like me and my daughter. We're Paul's descendants. They're not related to us. And I think the difference is obvious. I mean, it's going to be more obvious to me, but I've got faith that people can see this, and I can assure all your listeners this is true. I'm a real person. You can contact me on Facebook.
Yes.
And I'm everything possible to prove this. As we speak, I'm doing things to actually prove this.
Absolutely.
That I
Take
am.
it even further.
Yeah, I won't stop at this. I'm a real person and I'm accessible. If you want to talk to me, come and talk to me. So I can assure you this is true.
Why do you think there's been so much animosity towards you coming out with this story? Because even posting up the promo for the show, I mean, people were very passionate on both sides. Some people were 100%, on the side of what you're saying, and they completely believe your father was killed and this was an imposter. But then there was also a select few that 100% believe that it was all rubbish. Even some commenting that one of the persons knew somebody who actually was friends with and still is friends with Paul McCartney from before and currently, and that she says that the whole story is rubbish, that he's the same person. How do you think that's coming to be? How do you think he was able to, I could see him being able to con new people that he met, but what about people that he used to be involved with or had relationships with? How could he do that?
Yeah, sure, okay. And so going back to that time around 1966, how could that happen? I agree, Christina. It's very strange. At the time, though, remember, see, this is my thing. As Paul's son, it's my right to speak out about this.
No, absolutely.
Now I know for the fact that many people in the entertainment industry, especially around, Liverpool entertainment industry, know about this. It's a well-known fact. And I'm known about too by certain people in Liverpool. But I think lots of these people feel it's not their place to speak out about this. I think at the time it actually happened, some of my father's friends did speak out about this and weren't prepared to put up with this, and they were dealt with. Christina, Renee, they were dealt with,
Yeah.
and I mean, I can't say too much because I should only really talk about what I can prove.
Right.
Right.
You know, they were dealt with at the time, so there was a climate of fear. This wasn't just one guy taking over the Beatles. You know, if it was just him, then he wouldn't have got very far. But he's from a military background, and this is obviously a military exercise. There was a similar thing going on in Laurel Canyon in the States, and my father was a victim of the same thing happening here. Basically a military coup over the music, over the entertainment industry. They realised too late that the likes of my father and John and Bob Dylan and artists like that were peaceful people, wanted to see a more peaceful world. And they had influence when John spoke and said things. When they refused to play in front of a segregated audience in America, it had repercussions, political repercussions. So where they were just thought of as a bit of fluff, just a bit of pop music that had no consequence, actually it turned out they had quite a lot of clout in the world.
Yeah.
And when realised the effect that the music was having on the kids, the whole culture was hijacked. And
Wow.
the peace movement was changed into a hippie movement, and what was once a large peace movement was changed into free love and drugs, and pushed by the bands like the Byrds, the Doors. So the whole agenda of the music, popular music, was hijacked by the military, and I believe that my father was a casualty of this, as was John and George later on.
You know, that's true when you think about how music has changed through that period. It was during the whole Vietnam War period, and the Beatles wanted to bring peace into the music to try to make sure that we have the same kind of movement, and it affected people, and so that kind of messed with the military's way of thinking. No, we want fighters. We need, a totally different message, and so they kind of discredited the music industry, and so they pretty much bought up the industry to take over for their agendas. And I noticed that there's a big change, and it's still going on today, in fact.
Well, we
Yeah,
also
it's
know
never.
here, right? We also know here that, whistleblowers,
Yeah.
are here that are, discussing top secret information or stuff that they don't want to get out are also dealt with as well. And when we talk about, there being repercussions,
Hmm.
there was some very, very um, deep repercussions for what you believe to be for your mother, correct? I mean, can we talk about that and what happened with that whole situation?
Yeah, I got a visit from John, George, Richie, Billy, and his mother when I was 7 years old. Now, I knew that Billy wasn't my father, that wasn't Paul. Um, I've told this in a previous interview, but basically my mother came to the doorstep, said to John, John, I never told him, meaning she never told me that Paul was dead. Um, and I've actually written down in an affidavit what was said to the best of my recollection. I wouldn't accept Billy as Paul. I thought it was crazy that he was taking over my father's persona.
Hmm.
Um, John said, we're letting it be. But John and George never let it be. They made it quite clear that they didn't like him. They didn't like his ways. I think, they didn't. He didn't share the same values as John and George.
Hmm.
He was very materialistic, very egotistical, very arrogant, and that wasn't John and George's way. And they took the Mickey ruthlessly out of him. The Let It Be cover is a Mickey take of Billy. because John objectified him in front of me when he said, "We're letting it be, Dicko." He moved his eyes and he insinuated, he sort of called Billy it. I don't know whether you understand what I'm saying, but they never
Right,
let
right.
that feud never went away between John George and Billy, because Billy was not only claimed to be my father, he was legally representing himself as my father. So in
Right.
the dealing, even with the earlier recordings, and John and George were legally had their hands legally tied because they signed the Official Secrets Act. So they couldn't just come out and say in court, "Hey, that's not even Paul." So Billy was able to represent himself down the years as my father legally. And at the moment, he's actually trying to claim ownership to the early compositions, and he never wrote them. He never composed that music. He's got no right to claim that music. If Sony grants him ownership of that music, John, George, and my father will turn in their graves. It mustn't happen.
That's
Um,
horrible.
and yeah, he's got no right to claim those compositions. He's done a lot in his own right, Christina. And I mean, he's entertained a lot of people. I went to see him in the Liverpool Docks in 1983 and had a great night. I'm not denying his talent, but I think he should come clean over this now. Let my father rest in peace. And the work he's done stands on its own over the past 50 years, I think.
Right, right.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, and that's where a lot of people, have a hard time, because really the Paul McCartney that they've grown to know and love
Yeah.
is somebody who actually wasn't that person. And so that's, again, it's like a big slap in the face when you find out something like
Sure.
that. So I doubt that he'll probably ever come forward and address that. Now, does he publicly claim you as a son, or no?
Oh, no.
Okay.
My father's family or him have never acknowledged me in any way. I've never met anyone from my father's family.
So other
Um,
than the
and
fact when they came to your house to meet you when you were 7 years old, that's really basically all the interaction that you had with him.
that,
Now, how did your mom, again, how did she react to all this? Like, what was her thought of them just showing up? And of course, her,
it,
knowing that her her
it's
real true love
15.
is dead.
Oh, well, Mum was heartbroken. I don't know what they did to Mum after Dad died. Um, it was very strange because I said to George, my stepfather, "How did you meet Mum?" Thinking it would be a disco club party, whatever. And George said, "I just found her wandering round." So what they'd done to Mum, um, you know, prior to her meeting George, I don't know. But I could tell even as a young lad, she was heartbroken. George was a very, very good, kind, caring, loving man, a great man. But I could tell that he never replaced Paul in my mother's affections, and she was heartbroken. Um,
Right.
Not long after their visit, I don't remember actually speaking to her much after that visit because I came home from school and George says, "Mum's in hospital." I wanted to visit her and asked to visit, and I was told that she wanted to see me, but we were kept apart. About 2.5 weeks went by, and I came home and I found George in tears, and he said Mum was dead.
Oh
Um,
no.
Yeah, the doctor who treated Mum was a man called Dr. Ian Bogle. He was a local GP on Priory Road, and he later went on to become head of the British Medical Association at Tavistock House. So he did well for the local GP, didn't he? Mum was
Yeah,
fine.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I have my suspicions about my mother's death, and when I asked them about my father's death, George stopped me and said, "We have our suspicions," and then they carried on walking. So John and George were suspicious of my father's death. I don't have any proof. Um, I believe my father went missing on the 4th of November 1966 and was found dead on the 9th. I believe that he was with the lads, and he was only supposed to pop out for an hour or two, but he didn't come back. And I believe that was on the 4th, and he was found dead in the early hours of the 9th, which was a Wednesday morning.
Now, do you believe that he died in the car wreck, as is claimed on, by so many people?
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure how he died, Christine. You see, I believe it's possible that a car wreck was presented to them. The family were probably called first. But there's also this drawing that John did, which was supposed to be a representation of the state of my father's body when he was, found. And I believe that there were injuries inconsistent with a car accident. So
interesting.
Yeah. And there's also something else interesting. There's a book that came out by an author called Tom U. Harriet called The Memoirs of Billy Shears. In this book, Billy has actually come out and said, yes, I did replace Paul. Paul did die and I replaced him. He claims to be William Shepherd. William Shepherd is a talented musician who was around in the 60s, around Liverpool. He did Beatlemania albums, Pepper Pots, and Billy claims that that's him when it isn't. Because we spoke to William Shepherd's son, and William Shepherd, the William Shepherd, who worked on those albums, not another one, the William Shepherd, because I've heard Nick Collerstrom talk about this, and he believes the Memoirs book. But I've spoke to William Shepherd's son, and he's confirmed that no, he didn't take the persona of Paul McCartney. He moved to LA, continued to work in the music industry, and never actually met Paul McCartney, even though he was around Liverpool in the 60s at the same time as my father. So we've confirmed that his... Yeah, so lots of that book's a load of nonsense, and I'd also like to say that the video, the Last Will and Testament of George Harrison...
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Well, that's a load of nonsense too. I'm not sure what that's about. But my father was alive up until Revolver, which is 1966. Now, in that video, The Last Will and Testament of George Harrison, it talks about clues being left in Rubber Soul and Revolver. Well, my father was still alive, so obviously they weren't putting clues about my father's death when my father was still alive.
Right.
And that's just some of the inconsistencies. That particular video is full of inconsistencies. So is the Memoirs book. It's being put forward and widely accepted because of the Memoirs book that my father passed away on the 11th of September. This isn't true. It's obviously in Billy's interest to say this and put this out because it means that I don't exist, which is handy for him, isn't it? Also, in between September and when my father was found dead in October, there's actually an account by an author of Billy pretending to be my father and answering the phone as my father. So if there's a record of Billy pretending to be my father before my father was found dead, then that shows that he had prior knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's obvious reasons why he would want the date to be the 11th of September and not the 9th of November. I haven't spoke about any of the clues, on the Sgt. Pepper's drum. This is a big subject, and we could talk for a long time about it.
Well, the floor is open again. Wherever you want to take this, we're here to listen, and so it's been amazing so far.
Well, thanks, Christina. Do you have any questions for me? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot of questions coming in. We've got about 10 more minutes in this segment too, and then we'll be taking a short break, and then we'll be coming back, and we'll be taking any callers and any questions as well. As everybody knows, you can contact me on social media. You can send me a private message. As well as on Twitter, you can go under the hashtag Paranormal Connections, and I will get that as well. But yeah, let me pull up one of the.
Well, I have one here.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, there's one about the. You mentioned something. I was watching one of your your interviews that you were and uh, you were being strangled by the mom.
Right. Well, when they came up, I spoke to John,
Yeah.
and I asked John who she was,
Hmm.
and he said his mum, nodding to Billy. So it was Billy's mum. My grandmother Mary Mohan died when my father was only 14. So it wasn't Paul's mum. It was Billy's mum. Now, from the moment they walked up, she was looking at me with an angry look on her face, as if she didn't approve of me. And in the end, she snapped, and she put her hands around my throat, and she tried to murder me in the street. His mother tried to murder me in the street. I thought she was joking at first, but I actually felt my consciousness go. I actually felt dizzy, and my legs go from under me. And she was stopped just in time.
And what upset her so greatly that she would strangle you like that?
Because I wouldn't accept Billy as Paul. She must have seen me as a threat. Obviously, she knew I was Paul's son. I was quite a sort of cheeky kid. I mean, I didn't accept him at all, and I didn't give him a lot of respect. You know, and I said to John, we can't let it be. I didn't want this man using my father's name. I thought it was very strange. I mean, can you imagine that happening?
Yeah.
Well, especially at 7 years old. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like you're, older or younger to not understand. You're 7 years old, so you have an idea of what's going on. And I think any child that, finds out that they've lost their dad, and then now here's, somebody else who pops up that, supposedly looks like his dad, but as you said, like looking at him, you had a feeling right away that this isn't who he says he is. And again, like you're the mother, you knew that, how can she be the mother when his actual mother, your dad's mother, actually died when he was a teenager? So there's no way she could be.
But I knew Paul was dead, and knowing this, the first thing I said to John was, I looked from Richie on the left, George, John, and I looked at Billy and his mum, and then turned back to John and said, "Where's Paul, John?" And George and Richie started to laugh at this. She got even more upset and angry with me. I could sense it, and he was stood back, and he let his mother stand in front of him, and he just sort of looked up to the sky with his eyes, as if to say, "No," And then John said to me, "We're letting it be, Dicko." And I said, "You can't let it be, John. You'll never get away with it." And John said, "We already have."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we had, we had this conversation for about 10 minutes, and it resulted in me running at them, walking away from me, me running after them, wanting to know whether it was an accident or whether it was murder. And George stopped me, held his finger up, because he'd had enough of me. I'd upset them. I mean, I'd upset Billy and his mum, but I didn't think she had. Yeah. And George told me that they had their suspicions, of my father's death.
We're getting a. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I don't want like any animosity or bad feeling to come out of this, Christina, Renee. I'm not here to sort of judge William, but I'd like him to let my father rest in peace now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's done enough good work to stand on his own name, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
I know it's a bit.
Absolutely, yes.
If all this is settled amicably and brought out amicably, I don't see why it has to be a bad thing for anyone. I'm not trying to as people have said, "Oh, you're trying to destroy him." I'm not. I'm not trying to destroy him. I've got a lot of respect for the work he's done. He's entertained a lot of people. He's entertained me. But stop with the lies now. And
right.
you're not
And he's
going to
done
be
it under your dad's name, so that's the biggest thing. Do it under your own name. Do it under your real persona, because he's a talented man, obviously.
Yeah, so you don't have to use my father's name now, and you're never going to be able to claim those compositions as your own because I'm not going to allow it to happen. You know, they're not your compositions. He had nothing to do with writing that work, composing that work, and he shouldn't be allowed to claim ownership to it. And Sony AVS need to be informed, their legal departments. I'm serious about this, and I intend to see it right through. He knows who I am, and he knows I'm Paul's son. So
Right.
if he's listening to this, you're going to have to stop claiming ownership to my father's work, and you're going to have to come out in your own name, and everything can be settled amicably. And we don't have to dwell on any of the bad things, and we can just, move on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we've got a question from Pat coming from chat, and she's asking, are there any DNA tests that have been done?
I can't, that's ongoing. I can't talk about that at the moment, Christina.
Okay. Now, are there other potential siblings of yours out there? Are there other children that your father had?
Yeah. Just before I do that, I'd like to just address something.
Sure, of course.
Me and Mum were in Magical Mystery Tour. You can only just about see us, but I, as a baby, was in Magical Mystery Tour. Yeah. Now, there's, Sergeant Pepper. Have you ever heard "Good Morning"?
Mm-hmm.
"Good Morning" from Sergeant Pepper.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you listen to this, if you listen to the first line in the current context, it goes, "Nothing to do to save his life. Call his wife in. Nothing to say, but what a day. How's your boy been?" Yeah. Now, I have another sibling called Philip, but James Paul wasn't married to Philip's mother. That's well known. So if Philip is my half brother, James Paul wasn't married to his mother. Yet the song goes, "Nothing to do to save his life. Call his wife in. Nothing to say, but what a day. How's your boy been?" I believe this refers to Mum and me. About 18 months ago, I searched for videos, interviews with John Lennon on the 10th of July, 10th of July, my birthday, just out of curiosity, to see whether he gave any interviews on that day and whether he made any references. I found one where he was wearing his white suit. He gave an interview with Yoko, and on it, before he actually sits down to be interviewed, he says, "Oh, by the way, happy birthday, Queen." And it's the 10th of July. This is a reference to my mum as well. So, this is well backed up, Christina. I can assure your listening audience this is true. As I say, I'm accessible. Come and talk to me. I'm not behind a big fence or some kind of star that you can't talk to. You can come and friend me on Facebook if you want to talk about this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're at the top of the hour, and our producer has said since we started so late that if we want to just go through the break, we can. So we're going to leave that up to you, Stephen. If you need to take a break and get something to drink, or you just want to take a quick break, we can do that. Otherwise, if not, we'll just keep going and we'll start taking some questions.
Let's keep going, Christina.
All right.
Yeah, just to finish off about my siblings, your listeners might have heard of Bettina. Now, she's reputed to be my half-sister in Germany. My father had an affair with her mother, and she's actually taken William, Sir Paul, to court in a paternity thing in Germany. But obviously the sample, he's not her father. Our father died in 1966, so it was never going to match.
So they did it with a fake Paul McCartney, right? So that's
what
the
she
paternity
says.
test.
Okay. They wouldn't have needed to, Christina, because if he would have turned up, it wouldn't have matched. Just like
Right.
if I test my DNA against his, it will prove he's not my father because he isn't.
Right.
His
right.
name's William. Yeah. My father died in 1966. However, if Bettina or Philip or Michelle, another one of my reputed siblings, if they do believe James Paul was their father, then here's your chance to prove it.
Right.
I tried to contact Bettina on 3 occasions. I was part of a group Um, you know, before the interview with Jim Fetzer and Claire, I was part of Claire's group. Now, when I tried to friend Bettina on Facebook, I noticed that we had quite a few mutual friends. So she was friending people from the group, all right. But when I
Hmm.
sent a friend nothing. When I sent a message explaining that I believed I was her half brother and we should talk, no reply. I've not been able to get in touch with Philip, and I've heard nothing about him. I don't know where he lives or, what he's doing now. And Michelle is even more mysterious. You can't find any information about her. But I'd say to those three, if you'd like to quietly do a DNA test, prove that we are siblings, then this will prove something, won't it? It
Yeah,
will
I mean,
prove
it
that,
takes it a step further. At least it proves that you guys have the same father.
yeah. And if he's not our father, and I'm saying our father died in 1966, and we are brother and sister, I think that's pretty conclusive.
I would
um,
definitely say so. Now, I know that your dad has a brother, but the brother, which would be your biological uncle, has completely said he will not do a DNA test with anybody, correct? And is actually become close with the new Paul McCartney.
yeah. Nick Colliston bought me a book which says, I think it's McCartney family, where they're standing on the front. Now, it's obviously been in his interest, and, I don't know what's gone on to make Michael go along with this. I don't know the history of what's happened in the family, what went on when I was still a baby. Um, so I don't know the history behind this, Christina.
Very, very
But I don't.
interesting, though.
Yeah, I mean, I've never spoke to him. If I had a brother who died in suspicious circumstances and who was so successful, and he had a son and I knew it, I've got a picture of Michael McCartney here, and someone's picked the face off it. Believe it or
Oh,
not, it was
wow.
one of Mum. Yeah, it's of Michael. I could still post it, and people can try and piece it together. It's either in my grandfather's living room or my mum's living room, family living room.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and I've also got another photograph of my mum with one of her friends. Mum was friends with triplets, identical triplets.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, and I met my mum's best friend's son on Facebook. He sent me a photograph of mum with two of the twins, but not two of the triplets, but not his mum. Now I've found a photograph of mum with another one of the triplets, and obviously I don't know which one it is, but I'd like to post that on my Facebook. They closed my previous account, guys, and I've had to open a new account. So if he's listening, add me again, and you can tell me whether it's your mum with my mum in the photo.
Absolutely. That would be cool to know. So, yeah, and you never know where this, podcast might end up, in the hands of. So, if you're definitely out there, make sure to get a hold of Stephen. Now, another question we're getting from chat is they're saying, I wonder if Linda knew.
Yes, she did. I'm certain she knew, because she photographed my father um, before he died, and when she came back, she knew that it wasn't my father, and I believe they made a deal together, and she knew, but Heather obviously didn't know. Heather Mills obviously didn't know, because when they had their breakup, she spoke on American television, I think it was, and she said that he's betrayed her. She said it wasn't an infidelity. It's unimaginable. People would never be able to understand. And if you look at that interview, this is what she's talking about. Um, Heather Mills must have married Billy William thinking that he was James Paul, and then she found out, to her amazement, that she hadn't married James Paul McCartney. She'd married this other guy. um, and that's what all that's about. And if you look at the interviews with her, um, bearing this in mind, you can see it quite clearly. Um, there's interviews with John, Ringo, and George where they refer to him as Billy, Beatle Bill. You've heard "How Do You Sleep?" John was great friends with my father, and would never have wrote a song like that about my father. That was directed at Billy, the man who took my father's place.
See, and it's interesting, again, when you look at things through these glasses, so you look at the events that have happened, the different things that have been in the songs, on the covers of the songs, different things, they can definitely take on a different meaning, where you can definitely see where, your theory and what you're saying could definitely fit. And I'm kind of hoping that our listeners, are listening, and again, looking at this objectively and openly, and listening to all the information before they come to a conclusion one way or the other. But it's some amazing information that's being passed along, and I definitely could see where with Mills, when she was married to him, uh, finding something out like that would be, one of probably the biggest betrayal you could ever, come across. But do you think that, they got to her as well because she didn't come out, clearly and say, hey, this
Well,
is, the fake?
I think she felt that she had to sort of lay this on the line, and she came out and spoke about it and did everything but say it, didn't she?
Right.
So she came out in the media and kind of made a threat to reveal this. Obviously, things were settled, and she must have signed an agreement never to talk about this, and she was paid off, and the marriage was
That's kind of the way it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's what happened, So Heather Mills knows the truth. She does know the truth. Jane Asher knows the truth. There's lots of people. Cilla Black knew the truth. Most of sort of the Liverpudlian old school stars know this. They know James Paul. My father died in 1966. And as for this person where she's, whoever that is just loyal to William and trying to keep this hoax going, trying to keep this fraud going. So whoever in the chat room said, oh, I know someone who knew Paul and has known him right the way through, they're lying. They're just trying to keep this fraud going. Oh, they're wrong.
And maybe that's what their friend is telling them. But, again, until you talk to that person specifically, it's a third party, speculation, really, of what's going on, because
people often do that, don't they, Christina? They don't have any evidence, so they say, oh, I know someone. Do you get what I mean?
Right,
but
right,
there's
right.
nothing. At the end of the day, this is true. People don't like to think that they've been fooled, but it's very easy to do. Obviously, I'm harder because I'm Paul's son, and but whereas if you're just listening to the music, you're not going to notice these things. But I would encourage the listening audience to now just examine the albums after Revolver and bear what I've said in mind. Bear in mind that John and George weren't going to be pushed around by this guy, imposed on them, this military man who was imposed on them to try and take control of the band, so they wouldn't be political, but John and George weren't easily controlled. They were very strong characters, and they were geniuses, weren't they? So they were able to get all kinds of imagery in the videos, in the album artwork, and in the music, all kinds of stuff through, under the noses of the authorities, and I think that was John and George's genius. I think they were geniuses for getting that past the authorities, and I think when people see the truth about this and they examine the work, I think they'll see the work in a whole new light.
Yeah, it's definitely some interesting information. Now, Travis from Twitter is asking, this is a question to me and you, Renee. They're asking, Christina and Renee, do you think that Stephen looks like Paul McCartney or could be his son? And I will say personally, I have Skyped with you, and I've also seen your videos and pictures, and I definitely can see some of the similarities. Yeah. Personally, that's what I see. And you say that not only do you look like a lot like your dad, but your child looks a lot like your dad, right?
My kids do. I see him in all my kids. my eldest daughter, Ashley, looks a lot like him. I sent Shirley, and I can send you a picture of this, Christina, of my daughter and me. Someone did a comparison between me and my grandmother, Mary Mohan, and I seem to have the look of her more than anyone, and maybe a bit of a look of Michael as well. I don't believe I look a lot like my father, but I am 50 years old. My father died when he was 24.
Right, right.
I'm 50 now, so I'm over the hill now anyway. But I looked a lot like my father, do you know what I mean? But I have got a bit of a look of him. But I think my eldest, Ashley, it looks like him the most. She really does look a lot like him.
Well, definitely. If you want to send me that picture, then I'll post it up on Facebook, and then people can, make judge for themselves.
Yeah.
But
well, when I was active on Facebook over this, I did a sort of spot the difference competition, and there's a picture of Billy, William, my father, me, and my eldest daughter, and I put spot the difference. 3 of them are McCartney, 1 isn't. Little montage I did, so I'll send you it, Christina, and you can post it on the Facebook, and people can make of it what they will.
I'd love to. That'd be great.
Okay. Well, I did a few things like that. I was quite active for a while trying to get this information out. I've had this hanging over me for 43 years. And when I was younger, there was no way to get this out. When they walked away from me in Essington Road in Anfield, I felt totally dejected. And the sky went really dark, and I looked up at the houses opposite, and all I could see was the television screens flickering away. And I remember thinking to myself, that's all they know. All they know about this is going to come through that screen, and whatever that screen tells them, they're going to believe. What chance do I stand?
Well, thank goodness times have changed, right? I mean, well, we still know that people are heavily, heavily influenced on television and whatever they see on television. And we know that a lot of people don't do much research of their own. They would rather take the lazy way and just go and search a video. And if, this video says this, then they go with that. I mean, even today, there was so much information out there when I was researching, your story and just everything around it. And when I came across the last will and testament, of George Harrison, and I was, watching that. I mean, a lot of it wasn't making sense, but it was a lot of it was, backing up this, the story of that, your dad was dead, and that the other guy is an imposter. And when I contacted you, you said, oh, that's a lot of baloney, so don't put too much on it. But again, it was something that was out there, so it's like there's so much conflicting information out there. Sometimes it's hard for people to either decipher what's real and what's not. So it's great to be able to hear straight from you.
And that's what's highly important when we do shows like this, because what better way to get it from you personally on a live radio show, unedited, from your mouth. And so that helps the listeners who are listening to help listen to what you're saying, and also give them opportunity to do a little research for themselves and start kind of cross-referencing where things changed and which part makes sense and which part is actually rubbish. So
right, everything that you said, Stephen, can be, you can find if you look hard enough, you can find, and it can be verified. I mean, it's just people got to take some time to get out there and actually do some research of their own, opposed to just listening to whatever's on the, on the YouTube or wherever they're pulling the information up from. Because like I said, there's tons of articles and videos and documentaries on this stuff on both sides. It was just overwhelming, the amount of conflicting information that was out there.
Well, Sir Paul has got to get his point of view out, and he wants to get his side of the story out, and he's done this through this Memoirs of Billy Shear's book by Tom U. Harriet. Now, he was in the Facebook group, and I was talking to him, and I read the book, and I took exception to everything in that book. In it, Billy claims that my father's voice was going anyway. He had an impending sense of doom and knew he was going to die, and really wanted Billy to take his place.
Really?
Yeah, my father's voice went at the end because basically he couldn't sing. My father, he used to scream. He couldn't really sing properly. Now it was Billy, who John and George used to call the screamer. Not my father. My father sung, whereas Billy just screamed it out. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But he's all this around. Now we've traced the book, and it's published by Macaco. And I've spoke to the author, Tom U. Harriet, and he claims that all this information was given to him by Billy St. Paul. And it's a load of nonsense and lies. We were talking on Facebook. There's an account in the book of where Billy and Jane Asher helps Billy St. Paul break into my father's house. There's an account of this in the book, and it claims that she came in through the bathroom window from Abbey Road. Relates to this. When I informed Tom U. Harriet that it was a crime to have knowledge of a crime and not report it, he disappeared from the group.
Wow.
Yeah, and he came back about 2 weeks later as an anagram.
Wow.
Because he wants, yeah. But I sussed out that it was just an anagram of his, name, because he wanted to carry on participating in the conversation, I guess, without the risk of, me, having a go at him for what he put in the book. But I find that book unforgivable. And the fact that he's trying to claim my father and John's compositions is unforgivable. And if Sony grants him ownership of those compositions, then I think he will have won. And he doesn't deserve to win because he didn't write them. I don't care what they do with them, but it's important that he doesn't ever gain ownership of those compositions. And it's important that my father's given peace, to rest in peace now. It's been 50 years. The world can accept that my father's dead now. Billy did a great job of carrying it on, and he's had a great career and made lots of people happy. But now it's time to let my father rest in peace, and he's done enough stuff of his own where he doesn't need to claim John and my father's compositions as his own fraudulently, because that's what he's doing at the moment.
Right.
He's committed fraud by representing himself as my father and claiming to have written those compositions when he's not James Paul McCartney. His first name's William, and I don't know what his second name is. But like I said, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Also, what I'm thinking is, I mean, with something like this, I mean, he has enough songs now under his belt, under his self, that why does he need to claim all these other songs?
because he's greedy.
Yeah, I
He's
guess.
just out. He can get. You know what I mean? I mean, when's it going to be enough with him? Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Well, yeah. Well, Pat from chat said that it didn't take long for this to crumple because John informed the Beatles that he was leaving in 1969. So, I mean, do you believe that had a big part of why John was wanting to leave the group?
Well, of course it did, yeah. Because it was a bit of a shambles after Revolver, wasn't it? They put
Mm-hmm.
Sergeant Pepper with stuff that they already had, and it's amazing. I love those later albums, by the way. Abbey Road, the White Album, Sergeant Pepper,
Yeah.
Misty Tour. I love all that music, and I wouldn't want it not to exist. But it was kind of a mishmash, and I know they were always arguing, and I know that William was introduced to the band to try and control them. He tried to impose his will on the band, and he wasn't really an adequate enough musician to gain their respect. He claims that he's the genius behind Sergeant Pepper. No, I don't think he hardly played any part at all in the making of Sergeant Pepper. I believe he was just a bystander, because don't forget, he's a man, he's from a military background, he's not a very talented, experienced musician, and he walks into the Beatles scenario, and he really expects people to believe that he just went right and took control of that situation and created Sergeant Pepper. Oh, that's a lie, and it's an obvious one. So he's claiming that he's claiming he played a big part in the later albums, and he didn't. And he certainly had nothing to do with the compositions before 1966. And he's trying to claim ownership to those compositions as we speak.
Well, Mike is in our Spreaker chat and he is asking, did Brian Epstein play a part in all this?
I think he must have, Christina, because I'd love to know more about the events that led up to my father's death. I think that Brian Epstein was a target because of his sexuality. At the time, that could be used against someone, because it was actually against the law in the UK at that time. That's how backward we were. And I think that was used against Brian. I don't know his part. I've spoke to Shirley, and Shirley believes that Brian did have a part in all this, but I think it was just events, and I think it was more of a military coup than anything.
Well, yeah,
against
if everybody kind of rushes in and it is kind of telling everybody like this is not going to be talked about. I mean, it's not really any different, to be honest, than if somebody has like sees like a UFO crash or something like that. They first thing they do is go in and threaten everybody that if you say anything, what might happen to not only you but your family. So that pretty much keeps you quiet. So I could see where that could possibly be a scenario where once this came and they wanted to put this imposter in, that they said, look, this is going to be the story. This is what everybody's going to stick to. And, because we see that John Lennon, when he decided he was going to leave the group and no longer have any more part of all this, not very long after that, he was assassinated and killed.
Right.
Yeah. I believe John was going to speak out over this, and that's ultimately what got him killed. I believe that's what got George attacked in his home. George's home was very secure, yet this lad from Liverpool managed to get right through the security, straight into his home, straight up to where he was, and attack him and his wife Olivia. So, like with the man who was supposedly shot John, the guy sat there afterwards reading a book, didn't he? That doesn't seem the actions of a normal person to me.
No.
There's obviously something more to that than meets the eye, isn't there? And then we have the whole Rosemary's Baby thing tied into that building. And we also have the opening scene where there's a white beetle and a man on the floor, with a bloody head after jumping out the building. The implications of this really go off. I mean, there's the Pink Floyd song, Not Now, John. If you listen to the lyrics of that, that's talking about John Lennon. Pink Floyd
right.
song, yeah, about John Lennon. Lots of artists have mentioned this over the years. Do you remember the Fugees?
Yes.
One of their lyrics was Paul McCartney, Hardly. Lines in one of their songs.
Right.
So there've been little. Yeah, so people in the know, musicians in the know, have shown they're in the know by giving little nods to this, little mentions to this, and it's been like a muse for artists ever since it happened, I suppose.
It's all like this little puzzle that you have to kind of put together, because it's like so many people seem to be in the know, but everybody seems to be afraid to come out and just say what they know or what they think.
It's on me, love, at the end of the day, because think about it. If you've got knowledge, right, about another star, another radio star, a very well-known one, would you think it was your place to speak about it?
No, probably
you
not.
might have knowledge, but you probably wouldn't want to go public because you might feel it's not your business. Do you see what I mean, Shirley?
Yeah.
So I think there's lots of people who don't. Yeah, see, Rennie, there's lots of people out there in the entertainment industry who don't like this. They don't like Billy. They don't like what he's done. They're not really keen on him because I don't think he's really a very likable character, because he's quite egotistical. So I'd imagine he's made quite a few enemies in the entertainment industry, but all these people don't feel it's their place to speak out. This is on me. It's on me, this.
It's something too, because when you think about all the many musicians through the years, have these little tidbits that they release in their music. It's it's kind of like uh, what we call the Underground Railroad. Uh, where they would sing hidden messages so that they can throw off the scent of what was going on. When we're having the slavery here, and just they were just trying to keep from being caught and stuff. So it's kind of like that when it in the music industry.
Like a
When
secret
there's
code.
yeah, and it's hidden in
Yeah.
the music, even in album covers and so forth. And so all these little secrets are intertwined together. And if we pick up on it, a lot of musicians pick up on it because they study them, because they they look up to these other musicians of the
Well,
past. So
signs are still very well seen in all kinds of music
hmm
still. We've done shows on it where there's a lot of hidden, stuff put into these videos that they make and into the music that they make, and uh, highly suggestible to people of, when they see these things, they know what this stuff means, especially like with the Illuminati stuff, you see a lot of that stuff in the music videos. So very, very interesting. Let me see. We've got some more. We've got another question from chat. Does Yoko own any of these songs?
I don't. It's a big mystery, guys. Over who actually owns the compositions. I'm sure they must have. John's part of the compositions must have gone to Yoko.
Yeah, I would assume that since she's his
I'd imagine any of
beneficiary.
George's compositions have gone to Olivia and
hmm
Danny. But whatever's gone to Yoko, part is my father's compositions, because most of them were Lennon and McCartney, weren't they?
Right.
Um, so actually, Billy's trying to claim his half, I'd imagine, of the compositions. But he didn't, he's not Paul McCartney. He didn't write them. He's not, so he's got no right to claim them. So, I'd imagine Yoko owns John's part of it. Anything that was George's is George's, and anything that was Richie's is Richie's. As for what was my father's, it's probably been shared between the conspirators. Perhaps Michael and his family have done quite well off it. Do you get what I mean, Shirley? Christina?
Yes.
Perhaps Michael's been brought in and said, and William said, well, look, I'll claim these songs and you'll get some money off it or whatever, I don't know who's involved in the fraud on that side, but I don't think those compositions should ever go to him. That would be wrong, really wrong. I don't care what happens to them as long as they don't go to him.
Right. Yeah, because that would just be kind of like, sticking
But
the...
I feel like George, John, and my father wouldn't want him owning those compositions.
Well, yeah, or then something happened to him, and then it be passed on to his family and his his children. Now,
Well, he never had he never wrote them. They're nothing to do with him. He's fraudulently trying to, blatantly, fraudulently trying to claim them. And actually, when we look, if we look at the two Italian scientists who tried to prove that this was actually a hoax, and that, it's always been the same Paul McCartney right the way through, they studied it and found to their amazement that they actually proved it was true. That,
okay.
There is a difference after 66. I don't know whether you've heard of that. Renee, have you heard about the two Italian scientists that did the facial recognition?
I've heard something about it. I was watching one of your interviews, talking about that too. So yeah, I did hear about that.
So when you add up the vocal analysis, when you add up the facial analysis, this is actually provable in court.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite confident I can prove in court that this man isn't James Paul McCartney. And given the chance, I'll prove with my DNA that I am his son.
Now we're getting another question from chat. Have you ever approached your uncle to try to get him to do a DNA test with you?
No, I haven't, because he's made it clear that he's a friend of Williams. Um, in all, he knows about me, but he's never once come up and said hello. No one from the family has. I've been
So
completely outcast. My father died while I was still in the womb. Mum died when I was 7, and since then it's just like, get on with it yourself. I've been just left alone in the world.
this
Yeah.
is just so horrible. I mean, again, that you were conceived out of love between your mom and him, and then he dies before you're born. Then you
Yeah.
go 7 years believing one man is your father. Then your life gets turned upside down. When you find out not only is he not your father, but now then he dies, and then he's been replaced by somebody else. You lose your mother, and nobody in your dad's side of the family will acknowledge you or have anything to do with you. I mean, I can't even imagine how horrible that could have been growing up.
Well, it makes you feel unwanted, like an outcast, um, but that's just the way it is. I don't really want to know him now. He's made it clear where
Right.
he stands. I'm happy to leave him there. I don't want anything off him. I don't want anything off him, Billy, either. But he's going to have to leave those compositions alone, because as far as I'm concerned, he's never going to own them.
And it doesn't look like there's any chance of Billy going in for a DNA test to prove who he is, right?
I don't think he'd agree to that. I mean, if he would agree to it, it would be great,
Mm-hmm.
And are afoot. I can't speak about that. I will do a later date soon. Things
Yes,
are happening
absolutely.
but I can't speak about that just at the moment.
Okay.
Now,
But it's not
go
a
ahead.
static situation. It's an ongoing situation, and as we speak, things are being done.
Perfect,
Okay.
perfect. Now we're getting another question as well. What happened that made you want to come out with all of this information now?
Right. Okay, I went online in 2003. Over the years, I've always realised that the newspapers, the television, and the radio, they all sing off the same hymn sheet. It's just all a load of lies and nonsense. Everything
Mm-hmm.
that you see on the television is a load of lies and a load of nonsense, from the news to everything. I wouldn't trust anything, and I wouldn't speak to any of them, and I'm not interested in giving my story to a newspaper or doing a television show for the mainstream media. I'm not interested in them at all. They're a shower of lies. However, it's become possible lately to get my message out without talking to them. When I went online in 2003, I did search the web, for this subject, and I did find one or two small, forums and stuff and blogs, but nothing really at all. I couldn't find nothing substantial on this subject. I discovered Tina Foster's website a few years ago and made a few comments on that. And what happened was, one of Tina's friends, a girl called Mercedes, a sculptress from Spain, posted Please Please Me. The video Please Please Me, the song.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And someone made a comment underneath, and the comment got me riled up. And I commented back, well, actually, I'm Paul's son, and I've known he's been dead since,
Right.
I've known he's been dead since 1975. And it led on to by the end of the night, I had about 15 chat boxes open. And it just escalated from there. Claire Kern found me, and she organised a Jim Fetzer interview. And it just went on from there. But I've wanted to get the truth about this out for a long time. I think my father deserves to rest in peace now. And this needs to be exposed.
I agree. I mean, and I'm glad that you came to our show to decide to talk about this. I know that you had been on one previous show and it was, pretty much heavily edited. And, thankfully this is a live show. So whatever you say is how it is and what's going to be put out there. And, I was glad that you were willing to come on and share with this information. I mean, technology is great. It can have a lot of downsides, but it's also a great platform to get information out, especially if you get a show with a good following that can, get it out there, and then those listeners share the information and share the information. And again, I was shocked at how much attention the post was getting right after I had, posted it. I had to kind of go in and calm things down because people were so, passionate on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, they are over this. I mean, people love the Beatles. I'm not trying to destroy the Beatles in any way. In fact, I mean, if you know the truth, it will add to your enjoyment of the music, and you'll see a lot more you'll see it for what it is,
Mm-hmm.
for what it really is. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not saying that he's not a talented artist. You're just saying that he's not your father, Paul McCartney. So, claim yourself instead of claiming somebody else's fame and fortune and name.
He's got 50 years, of work. He's done all kinds of great work. So I think now it's time to put this to rest, and he can come out in his own name. And I know that people didn't like his music just because he was calling himself Paul McCartney. People like his music because they like his music, and they're going to continue to like his music still. And I don't want it to be any animosity. I want this to be, an amicable thing, but I can't go on. I have to do something so my father can rest in peace, and, to resolve this, because I won't stop until I do.
We're getting another question out of chat, and they're saying, speaking out like this, Stephen, are you afraid of retaliation like John and George?
No, I'm not, because I made the choice. That I've never been scared anyway. It's never been out of fear that I haven't spoke. It's been out of reasoning that I wouldn't be able to get through to the general public, realizing that all the mainstream media sing off the same hymn sheet. If I ever was to get the opportunity to speak to them, if I would have made a fuss about this, I don't think I would have been represented fairly. I don't think when I was a younger man that people were really ready to hear this. They weren't even ready to hear that my father was dead, never mind that I was his son.
True.
But no, I don't have any fear, no. None at all. I don't have any fear, no.
Now, since I know that this is only the second real interview that you've given about this, now, one of the things that I was going to ask you is, I know that your Facebook got shut down mysteriously after you had been using it. Now, have you had any other harassment or threats or anything to you since coming out?
Yes, I've had problems, but it's hard to know whether they're related or not. You see, when I was young, I obviously knew this was important. I knew they would that they'd staked a lot on this man, being my father, and I suspected that the powers that be were keeping an eye on me, because you would, wouldn't you? Thinking, well, I'm Paul's son. I know the truth about this. But you can't live your life thinking that everyone's sort of a spy. Do you get what I mean? All you can do is live your life as it comes. You can't think that every person you meet is, a member of the military intelligence or something. A strange event did happen while I was in Cyprus, though. About 18 months ago, I have an old friend out there, and we were in a bar. We were propping up the bar. The barman had already locked up around us, and it was about 3:00 in the morning, my first day in there, and we were having a little drink. And two guys came in early hours in the morning and announced that they were ex-CIA. I turned around to have a drink, and I was having a cigarette, and I'd had a couple of pulls of the cigarette, and he ran off with my cigarette.
Interesting.
For DNA.
Very. They announced they were not CIA, but ex-CIA. And he ran off with my cigarette. So at the time, I thought nothing of it, but they must have got a DNA sample.
Absolutely. That's right out of CSI. Either
mean,
give you
that's
something to
yeah,
drink or take a cigarette.
yeah. So they've come into the bar. I mean, it was strange that he came into the bar at about 2:30 in the morning anyway. But the fact that he came, announced he was from the CIA, spoke to me for a few minutes, me and my friend, and then I turned away and he'd run off me with my cigarette. And I said, "Where's he gone?" "Oh, he's taken my cigarette." I didn't realise at the time, but they might have been after a DNA sample. And that was about 18 months ago.
Wow.
So the CIA know all about me.
Yeah, well, that doesn't
um,
surprise me. And the fact that they're interested, that's even more interesting to me. I look at a lot of things that other people don't look at, but that to me is a very interesting situation that happened. Now, I remember in like the interviews and stuff, the military guy that showed up or supposedly showed up after your dad's car accident was connected with British intelligence, right? The MI5 group, wasn't he?
yeah, that's how the mythos goes, Christina. Yeah, um, that they were approached by this Maxwell guy who was part of the military intelligence. And if you read that, see, this is where he came from. Is where if that was known, it would be exposed as a crown conspiracy. This. So he keeps his origins, Billy, Sir Paul keeps his origins, even in the memoirs book, pretty shady. The way he says he got the job being Paul was because his uncle is a high-ranking Freemason. But that's just a smoke screen, in my opinion. Do you get what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yes.
I don't think he got this job because, that's just him putting up a smoke screen. The memoirs book is a smoke screen. It's not actual fact. You won't find a lot of fact in there. Even though the author says there's lots of provable facts, there aren't. It's a smoke screen for him to hide behind. He was military. He was put with the band to control them politically because the previous 18 months they'd been outspoken about their political opinions and they were having an effect. They were starting to have an effect. And also, I believe that my father was going to do a soundtrack for a film exposing the JFK assassination.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there was a few things going on, I think they were pretty much wanted by everyone in the end.
Well,
um,
I mean, it,
you
it
know,
makes sense. I mean, a scenario like that could be plausible. I mean, I don't, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I believe that there's been other people in the music industry that as well, who are very highly controversial, have ended up, you see them one minute, the next time you see them, they look completely different, they sound different. I mean, I think that it happens in front of our eyes a lot more than we would like to
yeah.
believe.
I,
But
I
again, I do
speak.
think it happens.
Bob Dylan's dead. I
Yeah.
don't I don't believe the person Bob Dylan is Bob Dylan. I believe Bob Dylan died in the 60s. Because he's on the Sergeant Pepper album, because of that interview he did in the back of the car with John. I could be wrong over that, but I don't think the man we know as Bob Dylan is the real Bob Dylan.
Yeah, and again, we see this a lot in very, groups that are very political or have a very, political statement. You get too close to revealing too much that they don't want revealed, even if it's just through, certain things here and there and little coded messages. If the right person catches on, then they're going to try to shut that down as quickly as possible. And again, with the quality and the capabilities that we have, we know that even in the CIA, that people have undergone plastic surgery to completely change their look, to make them
Mhm.
look like somebody else so that they can, go and portray themselves as somebody else. So it's not unheardable and it's not, unthinkable that something like this could have happened. I mean, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and also to those, you know, in the industry who, you know, try to, do the whistleblowing, what's going on in the industry, or taking a certain stand on certain things. We end up finding the various artists either, either dead of overdose or an accident or some
Or
sort of
committing
thing.
suicide.
Yeah. So it's always
Or
the
they
same kind of thing, you know.
will they'll get broken financially.
Hmm.
Their family will be attacked with drugs or whatever.
Right.
Look at Lauren Hill. She was quite an outspoken activist
Yes, she
and
was.
attacked. The income tax destroyed her, didn't he? Where other artists who sing off the same hymn sheet and are good, they get left alone. So it's certainly true. I believe they use lots of methods to attack artists that aren't willing to, follow the agenda. I also think that, the likes of hip hop, when these and punk, when these movements first come out, they have a political message, a good political message. I believe that they're subverted, inverted. Their message is subverted.
Hmm.
Hip hop originally had a political message,
Right.
whereas now it's just about sex and drugs and gold chains.
Yeah,
you know
very true.
that
Very true.
I
But again, we've seen things get a lot darker and change a lot. But talking about next week's show, because we're going to invite you to come back next week, and we're actually going to have a whole panel with us of people with various degrees that have been investigating your claims for a while now and are going to be coming on to share the information of why they have been able, what they've been able to verify and why they stand behind you on this matter. So I look forward to that show. And I also want to say I hope that we've given you an opportunity to talk about the things that you wanted to, and we've got about another 10 minutes still. So if there's anything that you want to end on that you haven't talked about already, I want you to feel free to take that time as well to share that with the audience.
um right. I never prepared for this very well, Christina. I
Oh, you've
said I
done
would,
great.
but um and I believe my father went missing on the 4th of November. Like I said, I believe that the boys rung round friends and family, and they were presented with this car accident on the 9th, but they were very suspicious of it, and John must have seen my father's dead body because he did this drawing, um, and I believe, as I said, that there were injuries not consistent with a car accident. Um,
Mm.
I'd like any information that anyone's got about this. I'd like to know. I'd like to know what happened leading up to this. Anyone who remembers my mother from back then, I'd like them to contact me. I'd like to put out a message to Philip, Bettina, and Michelle. If you'd like to, prove that Paul was your father, then you could quietly match your DNA with mine. There doesn't have to be a fuss, and no one has to be told about it. It can be done completely privately, and the results won't be discussed. Um, you know, um,
I think that's important. I really do, because I think that there's, obviously they're wanting anonymity with all of this as it is, and who
yeah,
knows what they've had to deal with, trying, like, especially Bettina trying to come forward and prove, paternity in her case, because
Right.
obviously she was involved enough where she took it all the way to court and then, suddenly retracted it afterwards. So obviously they got to her. But again, this is something that could then at least put all you siblings, minds to ease. It's
Right.
not to prove to the public that, yes, see, we told you that, he's our real father, or we're truly our siblings, but it's more to let you guys know and have that peace of mind to know that,
Having that closure. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
I'd like them to know that I'd happily do this quietly. It doesn't have to be a public matter, and it's very easy to do, isn't it? Now, um, so if they're interested in that, I'd happily do it quietly, and So if they'd like to contact me, I'm on Facebook. If any of your listeners would like to contact me with any questions, I'll accommodate them. Um, so I'm here. I'm a real person. You can talk to me. Um, So I'm not just some actor or someone that Christina and Renee have got on to do this show. I'm a real person. I am Paul's son, and the information that I've given you is correct. I know it's very hard to believe that you've been fooled into thinking this man is James Paul McCartney all these years, but it is true. And if you just like, I'd just like you to look at the clip from Hard Day's Night where my father sings "And I Love Her," and then look at Jude video and look at the eyes of those two men and tell me that's the same man. The first one is James Paul McCartney, my father. The second one, his first name's William. I don't know his second name, but he's the man who took my father's place in the public eye after my father died in 1966.
Now, weren't there analyses that were done that like face analysis, recognition analysis of the ears and the different, composition of the faces, and it was the analysis showed that they were not the same people?
Even with plastic surgery, Christina, there's certain dimensions that can't be changed. Two Italian scientists, as a fun experiment for their class in university, decided to prove that this was just a hoax, that actually, the James Paul McCartney from 1965 was the same one from 1980. You know what I mean? Same one all the way through. It was just a load of nonsense. But when they actually analysed the photographs and did the analysis, to their amazement, they proved to themselves that it was true. There were two different people. And this is a scientifically proven method that stands up in court. Also, there's been a vocal analysis that's been done by two different scientists, which have proved there's different people singing before 66 and after. Also, there's lots of evidence. There's backward masking at the end of the song, I'm So Tired. So when you play that, what sounds like gibberish, when you play it backwards, it actually says, Paul's dead, man, miss him, miss him, miss him. And there's lots of clues. I could go on for another 2 hours just about the clues left in the later albums that John and George put there. So it would always be on record what really happened, and that the authorities wouldn't get away with this.
Well, I definitely look forward to having you back on the show. I'm sure by that time, if there's anything that you can think of that you didn't share tonight that you still want to share, you can definitely will have the opportunity to do that next week. But again, we will be joined by a whole panel full of guests, so it should be a great show. Again, we welcome your calls in and your questions. We want to thank all of the listeners tonight that listen from around the world and that have been very, very active in the chat rooms and asking questions with our guest tonight. I think that he has done a great job fielding all the questions that have been thrown at him so far. So I want to, again, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on and sharing your story. I hope that we did you justice of, allowing you to really get, what you wanted out opposed to just a bunch of questions.
Thanks, Christina, Renee, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm looking forward to the next show, and hopefully I've sparked a bit of a debate, and the people on the panel can, they're welcome to ask me anything about this, and I'm looking forward to the next show.
We are too, for sure. Well, everybody, we've got about 4 minutes. We've got a few announcements that we've got to be talking about real quick, so we'll go over those real quick. First of all, we are supposed to be going up to Preston Castle for the Preston Castle Paracon this coming weekend. Unfortunately, since I've been sick and been in the hospital up until yesterday, we will not be attending that. It's with a lot of sadness because I go up there every year and represent Paranormal Connections, and our crew goes up there and we investigate, and it's one of our favorite local places to go. So we are sorry about that. But Renee and I will be going back up there to do the haunted house up there. So last year I did it by myself, and Renee was the cameraman. This year, since he threw me under the bus and tried to let all of the actors come and get me, he's going to do it with me, and I'm going to push him and make him trip all of the actors, and just going to run through now that I know the maze and get the hell out of there. And I'm hoping not to run into the mirror, into the wall that had the mirror on it like I did last year.
Oh, I'm just laughing with you. Well, were you laughing? I'm sorry.
Well, I wasn't really laughing, but I'm going to be laughing this year, I'm sure. We're also going to be at Cemeterium for Halloween. Well, probably right before Halloween, because Halloween is such a busy month for me. I never have any time to do anything. But we were asked back. Well, I was asked back to go back for a second round because now this year they've got a more improved scary clown exhibit, and also they have the zombie apocalypse part of it open that was not open last year because it was raining. So they want me to come back, so I agreed. I don't know why. I still don't see what I do for my listeners, but I agreed on the pretenses that I could bring Renee with me so that, again, he could have to go through with me because he threw me under the bus at that one as well, as we all know who saw the video.
Oh, me?
So we'll be, yeah, you going, hey, get her, go ahead of me. And the thing is that all that I saw was in front of me trying to find how to get the hell out of the place. So I didn't get to see all of the shenanigans that Renee was doing until I actually got to see the podcast archive. And
it must have been a fake me, you know.
No, it was definitely you because you were turning the camera to you saying, go past her, go get her, and then giggling into the phone, so into the camera. So yeah, it was definitely you. But that's all right, I got something for you. So if you have something cool that you'd like for me and Renee to come and check out, if you're having a UFO, paracon, cryptozoology, even a regular paranormal con, and you'd like for us to come and cover your event, all you got to do is contact me or Renee via Facebook or any of the social media sites that we have. You can go to our Facebook page and send us a message, and we'd be happy to do that. We're going to be doing a lot more traveling this year into next year, hopefully, and covering a whole lot more controversial topics. It seems to be just drawing towards me. I am going to have Steve Mera and Barry Fitzgerald from Ghost Hunters International will be on the show in November. They're going to be here talking about the Peruvian alien mummies that were found. They went and did a full investigation there in Peru, so they're going to be coming on the show to talk about what they found. Definitely going to be another interesting show. We've just got so many good things coming up. I can't believe it. And of course, we will still be doing our top trending news, as I know everybody loves those shows. It's so interesting that we have such great guests on, but those shows do just as well as the shows that we do that have guests on them.
Yeah, I love doing it.
Yeah, and it's usually a lot of crazy topics that I don't even know where I find them sometimes, but they're everywhere. I can't seem to not find them. But all right, we are at the top of the hour, so we've got to go. Make sure to hang on for the next show, and we will see you next week. You've been listening to Top Secret News on the UPRN Talk Radio Network, 107.7 out of New Orleans. We'll be back with you next week, and make sure to join me on Monday for Paranormal Connections. See you all next week. Good night.